Now, this is one of the classical legends of the destruction of a temple, which is very connected to these days now, because we are at the time of the 3 weeks, and soon is going to be Tisha B'Av, and Chazal actually start the legends of the destruction of the temple in the tractate of the Gittin with the story of Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza.
And then they go to the story of the Beitar village, and then they also go into the story of the other village that he used roosters and hens for marriage.
That's right. There's a whole series of stories there. And the question we're going to discuss tonight is, why did Chazal choose to begin the story of the destruction of the temple, specifically with this story of Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza? What message can we learn from the story for our days?
This is only Gemara, what we can learn from it. Yeah.
So will you please tell us? Please tell us. I am just going to tell the story in a very short way, and then we're going to go into depth, and we're going to try and understand it in a different level. Okay, so the story goes like this. There once was a person called Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza. And Bar-Kamtza used to be the greatest enemy of a man in Jerusalem who we don't know his name. It just we are going to call him the Baal HaSeudah, the person who decided to make a banquet, and he invited all the greatest, wealthiest people, the greatest sages in Jerusalem at that time, for a huge banquet. And he had a messenger, and the messenger was supposed to deliver the invitation for this great banquet to his best friend Kamtza. Okay, but by accident he made a mistake in the address, and he brought it to Bar-Kamtza. So you could imagine the reaction of the host, when instead of seeing his best friend, the person who he hates most in all of Jerusalem enters his banquet. So he was so angry that he took him by the arm. At the beginning, he asked him to leave. He said, "You must leave this instant." And Bar-Kamtza, he was a respectable person. He didn't want to be humiliated like that. So he said, "Listen, if you let me stay, since I already came, I will pay for whatever I eat and drink, okay?" But the host wouldn't have it, and he said, "You must leave this instant. So he said, "Listen, you were humiliating me in front of everyone, in front of all the who and who's in Jerusalem. If you let me stay, I will pay for half of your banquet." So that sounds like a good deal, right? But the host wouldn't have it. He said, "You must leave right now." So he said, "Listen, if I'm going to leave now in front of everyone, I'm going to be so humiliated. I will tell you what, I will pay for everything." Okay, so imagine that the host did a banquet in the Ramada Hotel, okay, a 5-star hotel, and everything. It probably cost him, tens of thousands of the shekels. What did they have at that time?
Salt. Didn't they use trade with salt?
I think they had dinars.
Oh yeah,
It was dinars. The Gemara says dinars.
Okay, so dinars. Okay, so tens and thousands of dinars. Okay, so that sounds like a good deal, right? He is going to cover all of his expenses. But he said no. And he took him by the arm and in front of everyone and pushed him out. So Bar-Kamtza was humiliated, he was angry, and he was filled with revenge. And he said, I'm going to teach everyone a lesson. And he said, since the sages were sitting in that banquet and they were silent, they didn't say a word, I am going to... That's right, I am going to go to the emperor. I'm going to go all the way to Rome, and I am going to tell the emperor that the Jews rebelled against him.
Well, I saw in the television about, I'm not sure if this is true, I'm not sure. Well, it's on but Bar-Kamtza was like the leader of the rebellion. I'm not sure if that was true or not. I'm not sure where I got that, but I was wondering, who was the leader of the rebellion in the first place?
I think that you are speaking about Bar-Kokhba. But he lived many years afterwards. So Bar-Kamtza went to the emperor and he told him that the Jews rebelled against him. So the emperor wasn't a fool, and he said, how do you know that they... Bring me proof, bring me solid proof. So he said, let's do an experiment. Bring a sacrifice, send a sacrifice to the temple and see if the Jews will sacrifice it. If they sacrifice it, so they didn't rebel against you, but if they didn't sacrifice it, so it's a sign that they rebelled against you. So he volunteered, of course, to he bring the sacrifice, and on the way he made it pasul. In a way that the Romans didn't consider it as a pasul, but in halachic terms, it wasn't suitable to be sacrificed. So the sages who saw this a sacrifice, they said, well, it is a matter of life and death. There's a concept of a shalom malchut. Okay, you have to have peace with the kingdom of which is a ruling. Okay, so let's sacrifice it. Okay, but there was a sage called Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas. He was one of the greatest sages then. And he said, wait, if we sacrifice it, your people are going to... What? Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's kill them. Wait, if you do that, the people will think if you bring a non-kosher animal to the mizbeach, that or like a puzzle animal to the mizbeach, they'll think that you deserve death.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do anything, and because of his humility, we destroy the big mustache.
That's right. So Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas opposed any suggestion here. He opposed sacrificing, and he also opposed the killing of Bar-Kokhba. So it says that he didn't make any decision, and it says anvatanuto. We're going to talk about his humility. We're going to talk about it later. It says, Anvatanuto shel Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulas hechriva et beitenu, destroyed our temple, salfa et hechalenu, and burned it, veheglitanu mi'artzenu, and because of him, we actually went into exile. So, the rest I am not going to tell yet. The rest of the story I'm going to keep you in suspense. But until now, I would like to ask you a very simple question, and I would like everyone to to suggest answers. This is the story of Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza, right? Here's a short version. I didn't tell all of the details, but I would like us to do it together. The following experiment, okay? Let's say that this is a court, okay? And all of you are esteemed judges, okay? And you have got this case, and you have to try and discover who is responsible for the destruction of a temple, okay? There are different
Is this gonna be like, is it the host, is it Kamtza, is it Bar-Kamtza,
Right,
is
sir.
it the rabbi? We
right.
have to discuss between
Mhm.
one of those four, the biggest responsible,
Right.
responsible.
Absolutely. So everyone in his turn is going to say who he thinks is the one who is the most responsible for the destruction of the temple, and you have to say why. Okay? So Benissim, please.
I can't say either one of
Hey,
them.
go
I
ahead.
think both have equal part in the same.
Who do you mean both?
Both Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza.
Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza. Okay, so now explain why. Why do you think?
They both had the faults of that they didn't have Avat Chinam.
Okay, because they didn't have the loving kindness.
Both of
So
them, they were. It takes two to tango. They say, right? They didn't. They should have.
you mean the Bar-Kamtza and the host, right?
No, sorry.
The host, right? Okay.
I think they should have. Like, it's not a very very big deal here. They could have made a little compromise.
Right.
Pshala
Right.
or something. Gotta work. When you have an argument, you gotta work both. How you say sides, both sides out. You have to work both of them out.
Okay, very good. So when Nissim
Both of them
is
have the
saying
same equal amount of.
that they both of them are responsible, also Bar Kochba and also the host. Okay, very nice. What do you say?
I would say maybe the sages.
The sages. Why the sages?
They didn't create the situation, but given that they had the wisdom to maybe settle it right away, they could have prevented it from continuing.
Okay, very good. You remind me your name?
Yeshua.
Yeshua. Okay, great. So what you were saying the sages, because that they should have prevented it, they should have done something in order to stop this terrible drama, right? Okay, very good. And what do you say?
Well, I said it as before when I also did this experiment. It's the host, because he was the one that started this all in the first place. If you wouldn't have just made some reasonable compromise with Bar-Kamtza, like Bar-Kamtza was suggesting, none of this would have happened at all in the first place.
Okay, very good. You were saying the host because he didn't make any compromise. Okay, and what do you say? Okay, David.
Hey, 1 second, I missed the story, so I just read it.
Okay, fine. So we will come back to you. Okay.
So I would.
He's shy, right?
No. I'm Ben.
Ben, right? Yeah.
So I'll put it like this, right? I think that of course we do talk about Siat Chinam and Avat Chinam in the story a lot, and I think that perhaps one could look at the people spectating this, and they might say that something's clearly wrong here. You should save them from embarrassment. At the end of the day, right, you have a series of humans, and each human here has their human flaw, right? It's not abnormal for someone to be so angry at someone that maybe they would not want them at their party even if they're willing to pay for it. It's not that abnormal for a person to be angry that they would be punished, that they would what's it called? That they would feel so embarrassed to leave, and it's not that abnormal that spectators might not fully understand the situation, therefore not want to talk or speak up because they don't fully understand what's going on. They don't want to rebuke the host, right? So the way I see it is this is really hashgacha pratit for the Kohanim, right? And the Kohanim have a choice between essentially doing what they must do, even if it means the temple's destruction, even if it means war, no matter what the consequences, are they going to do their job and not offer something sacrilegious, or are they going to compromise? Right. So I think there's another aspect to the story. Beyond the fact that these are human beings with human flaws, that perhaps the rabbanim should have been better than that. But I suppose the idea that there were rabbis in the story that sort of they made a miscalculation, I suppose, is another aspect here. But other than that, I think that it's really a test for the Kohanim.
So you were saying, Ben, that the Kohanim in the temple that had the dilemma if to sacrifice or not.
And they did the right thing, it's the other thing.
I see that they supposedly he did it according to the book, but because they did the right thing, the temple was destroyed. Is that?
Well, they did the right thing, and the temple was destroyed, but the Torah was preserved.
I see, because of the Torah was preserved.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Chaim, what do you say? Who do you think is responsible?
Well, I think the person who made the first mistake in the whole series of events is responsible, and I see that as Bar-Kamtza. He was in a place where he wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't necessarily, there was some sort of confusion. That's a normal thing that would happen, like in missing the mail getting messed up. It's not abnormal. That happens sometimes. And even though he was in this party and got kicked out or whatever, the host is in every bit of his right to get the person out of his thing that he's organized. And that really, when he comes outside, so it's really like something negative that Hashem made happen to Bar-Kamtza, and then he went and he had this like horrible reaction that was completely usher, like the idea to take revenge, completely usher by everyone's standpoint, and he got all the way to the point where he caused all this horrible stuff to happen, and it was like, I see it as Bar-Kamtza making a fight against Hashem, and if you're going to try to make a fight against Hashem, of course Hashem is going to like obliterate, matters to you. So I think it's clearly Bar-Kamtza that made the mistake.
Okay, fine. So you were saying about Kamtza? What did you want to say?
Why did the emperor want to send a peace offering again?
So he wanted to test and see if what Bar-Kamtza said was true, but he didn't want to just send all his troops for nothing.
How does it work? How would he get sent for this trip?
Because if the sages in Jerusalem sacrifice his offering, so it means that they didn't rebel against him. But if they don't sacrifice his offering, it means that they rebelled. This was the test, but he wanted to do. What do you say, David?
I think it's basically the fault of the host and the rabbis who sitting with him in the party who did not intervene when he tried to push him out of the house. Because in either case, like the host may be right to throw him out, but the rabbis should maybe try to explain the situation. Maybe like they got a mixed up with the mail, okay, or the messenger did call the wrong guy. They could try to make some peace between them, or at least to explain the situation. But they did not. They just looked at the situation and passed it by. So that caused Bar-Kamtza to snitch, basically, or like to go to Romans and betray his own people, which then led to destruction. So I think the fault is basically on the host and the rabbis who did not intervene. That's my opinion.
So the host and
the
sages.
Right, the host also he could forgive him, like at least he tries to his enemy tries to be nice, tries to make peace somewhat, and he totally refuses. So yeah, that's like the
very good.
Unforgiving trait brought this situation. Boy.
Okay, thanks. Moshe, what do you say?
So the last one, I got to make it special. So from as I understand the story and have heard the story before, I would say honestly, it's the fault of the Romans.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest, they were the ones who destroyed it.
Okay.
Wait, was it the Romans or was it someone else?
Well, it was the Romans, but we are going to talk about that.
It was the Romans. The Romans were the ones who destroyed it.
Mm-hmm.
The Romans could have chosen not to destroy it,
Mm-hmm.
but they destroyed it. I think it's meaningless to say, well, it was this individual because he did this, which led to this, which led to
Mm-hmm.
these chain reactions. You should look at the very end of the chain. The Romans chose to destroy the temple.
Mm-hmm.
It is their fault that the temple was destroyed. Even though Bar-Kamtza
Yeah.
provoked the Romans
Mm-hmm.
by purposely bringing the non-kosher animal, doesn't matter. They were the ones that made the choice. He did a horrible thing,
Mm-hmm.
Bar-Kamtza, but it was the Romans who destroyed the temple. They're the ones to blame.
Okay, very nice. That reminds me of a famous question that the Maimonides deals with. Here's a question. It says, why were the Egyptians for blame for enslaving the nation of Israel? It says in the Torah, many years before, to Avraham Avinu during a Brit Ben HaBetarim, V'avadum ve'inu otam 400 shana, and they are going to enslave them for 400 years. So if it was decreed many years back that the Egyptians are going to enslave the nation of Israel, why were they punished? It's a philosophical question. To do with your free will. And the answer is that it is true that there was such a decree, but the Egyptians, they had 100% of your free will. They chose to be the ones who are going to enslave the nation of Israel. So that's why they were punished.
Nazis, an order is an order. It's not a valid excuse. You, as an individual,
That's right.
made the choice.
That's right. So the same thing applies to what you said about the Romans. What do you say, Ben?
So I think that it's not that Goyim don't have free will, because they do, but I think that if they're not attempted, like, their free will is when, like, at least according to, like, the Tanya and whatnot, well, I suppose the Tanya almost doesn't even really talk about this. It sort of just talks about them when they're not choosing to be, like, Noahites or whatever. It's like their free will is to break out of their, like, religion and ways of doing things and embrace God. Right, but if they don't do that, essentially they're kind of in a state of being part of nature, and we don't necessarily look at them for causes for things. Like we kind of see them as like people naturally reacting in the way that God wants them to. Like in our tradition, we usually don't see them as the causes. We see them as almost like a
tool of Hashem.
Yeah, a tool of Hashem. Like there's a statement that when Kaiser came to Yerushalayim, he shot arrows in the 4 directions. They all ended in Yerushalayim, and he came up to some kid.
I asked him, what did you learn today? And he learned that.
He learned that. You know the quote?
I should put my hand of vengeance on Edom that destroyed from me or something.
Yeah, so it's like Edom. So it's like they're in the cycle of destruction. It's almost like when Rabbi like Hillel talks about in Pirkei Avot, right, where he sees the skull floating in the water, and he says that for drowning others, they'll drown you. You are drowned, and the people that drowned you will also be drowned.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they're just kind of in the cycle. Like they're not really the cause here. If they want to escape the cause, like Kaiser did and convert to Judaism, they can. Like it's not like they're robots, right? They're human beings. But we shouldn't be looking at them when we're doing a Jewish analysis of something. We should be looking at ourselves.
Okay, so you would disagree with Moshe?
Yes.
Well, hang on, I want to...
That's okay, that's okay, you could disagree with it.
With that logic, you just say, fine, it was all of Am Yisrael's fault. Because obviously all of Am Yisrael did something that would cause Hashem to make it so that the temple was destroyed. So you could say that it was everyone's fault. If you want to...
I would actually say that you could
We're
the story,
looking at
though.
what broke the ice, no?
Well, I would say that.
What broke the ice? They go back to the very beginning of the story. The messenger, it was the messenger's fault.
Okay.
If you want to go back to the beginning of the story and say what was the first domino to
Did
fall?
the messenger really do it
Messenger
on
did
purpose,
it
though, is
fall,
the thing?
right.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
It does matter because it wasn't he wasn't his intention.
His intention wasn't to bring his
Just-
enemy.
Let's
His
just
intention
see
was
why.
to bring
Then we would have to ask the question
he was
why
ordered to.
he did it. Was he being reckless or
Doesn't
what?
say.
Exactly, it doesn't say, so we don't
So
know.
so we assume it was unintentional.
Why do we have to
But
assume
the
it's
other was
unintentional?
because we have no other information.
No, we can't assume either way. Because we don't have any information, we can't assume either way.
I think we just look at the different characters in the story that we have here in front of us, and we just analyze who did the Avera
I mean, you can.
and the significance of the Averas, and just count the Averas. That'll give us like an idea.
What do you mean counting the Averas? Count the Averas numerically.
No, I know.
Obviously, Bar-Kamtza is a protagonist. If you want to analyze it from a literary point of view, you could say Bar-Kamtza is the protagonist, and therefore it's his fault.
Well, let's think about this like this: did Kamsa do anything that was it be against halacha and Torah?
Yes.
Yeah, you talk or like he did blemish the
Kamsa.
What?
Kamtza?
Oh yeah, embarrassed.
Oh.
That's a Torah. That's a.
do anything?
Yes, he embarrassed. What's his name?
Is it embarrassing?
Kamtza was not the host.
No,
Oh, Kamsa was not.
The host, we don't know his name. We don't know the name of the host. And Kamtza was either one of the best friends of the host who was supposed to come. He wasn't connected to the story, but soon we will talk about him.
So the Ish, would the Ish do anything that was?
Well, listen, the Ish could have been the Ish. Yeah, he was wrong, but it was not something that I don't think anyone else here wouldn't do.
It was not.
What he was wrong.
What was the Avera that he did?
Well, he embarrassed someone in public.
That's a mitzvah.
But
You're right to not to
And
do.
you can, listen, it comes from an understandable point of view. I mean, if the person that you hate the most shows up at your party,
It's not a mitzvah to not embarrass it.
That's not true. That is not true. There is absolutely a mitzvah not to embarrass it. Due to the point where you can eat something that at someone's house in certain realms of doubt and kashrut because you don't want to embarrass someone. Like that's the extent to which there's a mitzvah not to embarrass someone.
I mean, I could see it as an extension of like Avas Yisrael or something like that.
I think there might be
There's not like
one of the 613 that
Yes, there is.
I think that could be.
Rabbi, is there a mitzvah al ta'aseh to not embarrass someone?
Well, it says, נוח לו לאדם שיפיל את עצמו לכבשן האש ואל ילבין פני חברו ברבים. It says, but one should throw himself into the furnace of fire rather than humiliating someone in front of publicly. So it is something which is very severe. It is a very difficult. So let's analyze, as Chaim suggested, the different characters, and then it's going to be a surprise. Then it's going to be a surprise which we're going to suggest. So first of all, some of you mentioned the messenger who made a mistake, right? Now, if he would have invited the correct person, so this whole story wouldn't have come, right? So he is actually responsible in some way. Now, it is obvious that not everyone is responsible at the same extent, but everyone is somewhat responsible. Now, the host, some of you mentioned the host, that he acted in a very cruel way to Bar-Kamtza, humiliating him like that. Like, it wasn't his fault that he came. He probably thought that the host wants to be friends with him. He wants to make up. So it is obviously there's a very big difficulty with the host. Yeah.
So what I want to add is, I think one of the things the event said that it's probably called Am Yisrael's fault, and I think the story very much shows this, because we have the messenger who is careless,
Mhm.
and embarrassed in front of the sages.
Right.
I think it shows everybody.
Mhm. Everyone is responsible in some way, except for
So the wrong
one person, except for the emperor, who we're going to talk about him in a moment. So, some of you said that the sages who were silent, they were responsible. Now, I would like to just focus on that for a moment, and this is something very important. It says in a midrash called Eliyahu Rabbah that you know that there was a very tragic story which is mentioned at the end of the book of Judges, called the Pilegesh Bar-Giva, and 70,000 people were killed. Almost the whole tribe of Binyamin was destroyed. And the sages say, who is responsible for that destruction? And they say it is because of the Sanhedrin. Why? What is the connection to the Sanhedrin? So it says that the Sanhedrin should have went all over Israel.
I actually did hear about this and teach them about the laws of being nice to
That's right, of the derech eretz, of the ways that one should act with each other, and they did not do so.
I'm sure it was Asniel who was the prophet at that time, and he was the one that mainly got punished.
They should have gone. It says it in the Midrash in a very dramatic way. It says, היה להם לסנהדרין גדולה, שניח משה וישוע פנחס בן אלעזר עמהם, שיקשרו חבלים של ברזל במותניהם, והגביאו בגדיהם למעלה מרכובותיהם, ויחזרו בכל העיירות ישראל, and they should go to all the towns of Israel. יום אחד בבית אל, one day in בית אל, יום אחד לחברון, one day in חברון, יום אחד לירושלים, וילמדו את ישראל דרך ארץ, they should teach עם ישראל דרך ארץ, בשנה, בשתיים ובשלוש, as long as it needs. עד שהתיישבו ישראל בארצם. But the Sanhedrin did not do so. What did they do instead? אלא כשנכנסו לארצם, כל אחד ואחד נכנס לכרמו ולינם. And when they entered the land, everyone went to his vineyard, and אמר שלום עלייך נפשי כדי שלא להרבות את התורה. And they said, I am only going to take care of myself, and I am not going to spend time to go around Eretz Yisrael and teach derech eretz. So, when religious leaders of a generation are silent and indifferent, when terrible deeds are done, and they say to themselves, we are only going to take care of ourselves, this brings to a destruction. So, the silence of the sages was definitely a very big cause for the destruction. And now, of course, most of you actually said that Bar-Kamtza was responsible because that he doesn't only seek a revenge to the host and the sages, but he betrays the whole nation of Israel, and he decides to bring a destruction of the whole nation. So this is, of course, a completely exaggerated. So it is true that the host was hostile towards him, but why destroy everything? So
The same thing that happened to him, he did it at like a 10 times greater, 100 times greater scale.
that's right. And then we're going to move to D. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. Okay, so we said we are going to talk about him. Now, as we said, that when a Bar-Kamtza comes to the temple with the offering of the emperor, so there's a whole debate among the sages if to accept it or not to accept it, if to kill him or not to kill him. And it says about Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas that his humility destroyed the temple. Now, why do you think the Talmud referred to the reaction of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas as humility? Humility is normally something good, right? It is a good trait to be humble, right?
I actually heard something similar to this and everything all, and basically, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas basically thought that every single other rabbi was higher than him and everything all. So, like, if he were to say something, no one's gonna have to listen to him and everything all. And so when he spoke up and everything, and like said something, everyone had to listen to him because he was the highest rabbi, and he didn't know that at that time.
Very good, very good. Humility does not mean not knowing one's true self. Humility, Moshe Rabbeinu, for example, that it says that he was the most humble person that ever walked the earth. He knew that he was Moshe Rabbeinu. He knew that is a strength, is a spiritual strength. He knew who he was, and true humility does not mean to not take responsibility. And Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, he used the bad humility. Rabbi Cook says that there is a kosher humility and there is a non-kosher humility. A kosher humility means that you know that you are you could save the situation, and you save the situation. You do not boast and brag about it, but you feel the responsibility and you save the situation. And non-kosher humility, it is about someone who says, who am I? I can't do anything. There are others who are greater than me.
That is humility. I would call that lack of self-confidence.
That's right.
It's a negative trait.
That's right. So the sages used the word humility. Anvatanuto shel Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. It means the second kind of a humility, the non-kosher humility. So he was the only one who could save the situation. He was the spiritual leader. But he did not value himself. He didn't understand that he was able to change the situation. So So he was responsible. Now, we're going to talk about Nero Caesar, the emperor. Okay. Now it is a very strange. It is a surrealistic that the only one who actually is not responsible is the Roman emperor. It is completely absurd. But not only that he doesn't run and attack the people of Israel, but he also tries to discover if he has a godly intention here. And when he discovers that there is a godly intention, so he decides to run away, and he decides to be Jewish. And it says that afterwards, Rabbi Meir was his descendant. So it is very interesting that the greatest enemy actually, it turns out, to be the best one in this story. Now, so we saw here, we analyzed all those who are responsible, okay? And everyone is actually responsible in some way or another. There are, of course, those who are more responsible than others. But now is a time for something very, very interesting, okay? We're going to go deeper. We're going to go underneath of the surface, okay? Now, if you could please look at the source 1, okay, on the first page. It says, it starts like this: Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza charuv Yerushalayim. Because of Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza, Jerusalem was destroyed. Now, what question could you ask about this
It
first?
wasn't really much of Yerushalayim. That was more of like Beit HaMikdash. Yerushalayim was still allowed to be there.
Well, we
Okay.
don't know anything about Kamtza.
Right.
I mentioned Kamtza,
Yeah.
except for the fact that
And
he was wanted
Bar-Kamtza.
to be. Well, no, we don't. The only thing we know about Kamtza is that he was intended to be invited to the party, but wasn't.
Okay, very good, Moshe. So if this is the obvious question, Kamtza was not even connected to the story. So why, for 2,000 years afterwards, we remember his name as the one who was responsible for the destruction of the temple? It says, Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza. The first one mentioned is Kamtza. And he is still waiting there in his house for an invitation that is never going to come. So why is he considered the one who is responsible? And over here, I would like to suggest the following suggestion. The Maharasha, one of the great commentators on the Talmud, he says something like this: that Kamtza and Bar-Kamtza. What is Bar in Aramaic? Son. So it is Kamtza, who is the father, and Bar-Kamtza is a son, right? So, if you put everything together, you could understand something extraordinary. Kamtza, let's say you draw it like this. Just a moment, let's find something that works. So there's Kamtza. Okay, and there's Bar-Kamtza. Okay, and then there is the host, right? Okay, now Kamtza is the best friend of the host, right? And Bar-Kamtza is the worst enemy of the host, right? Now, what father would be the best friend of someone who hates his son so much that he's going to throw him out of a banquet. So you could see over here that in the family there was betrayal. In the family, the father was a best friend of someone who hates his son. So this is actually the key to the whole story here. If you want to understand the destruction of a temple, you have to first look at the destruction of the home, of the family. Because the temple is called the Bait. Okay? So if you speak about the Bait of a family, when there is betrayal in the family, when a father goes against his son, so this actually leads to the destruction of a big bite of the temple. So this is actually the key to the whole story. This is a microcosmos of a destruction. The destruction of the temple starts from a destruction of a home. So this is what the Maharasha tells us. So the in order to build the temple, one has to start from the family relationships. One has to start with building one's personal home. And then when the Shekhinah dwells in one's personal home, it is also eventually going to dwell in the home of a nation, in the Beit HaMikdash. And as Rabbi Kook says, ואם נחרבנו ונחרב העולם עמנו על ידי שנאת חינם, נשוב להיבנות והעולם עמנו ייבנה על ידי אהבת חינם. If we were destroyed and the world was destroyed with us, with שנאת חינם, with hatred for no reason, it is going to be built from unconditional love. And love starts from the home, and then it continues to the rest of the nation. So this, according to the Maharasha, is the reason why Kamtza was mentioned here, even though he is not connected directly to the story. But if you go deep enough, you understand that this is the real story. So, any questions, comments? Okay, so good evening, everyone.
Thanks so much, Rob.